The world's fastest growing humanitarian crisis, as thousands of Rohingya refugees are spending a fourth night stranded near the border with Bangladesh. Hundreds of thousands have left their homes in Myanmar, where they'd faced a military offensive following claims that Rohingya militants were guilty of attacking police checkpoints there. More than 500,000 Rohingya Muslims have now fled across the border into Bangladesh, and over the past 3 days, some 15,000 refugees have been stranded with limited supplies of food and water. Well, my colleague Clive Myrie is in the port of Cox's Bazar, and he sent this report.
In the distance in Myanmar, where Rohingya villages have burned in recent weeks and the people have been driven out, there's another fire. It's ethnic cleansing, says the UN. And the purged are fleeing for their lives into neighbouring Bangladesh.
In my village, many were killed, but my son had just been born, so we have only now been able to escape. We haven't had time to name him.
What's going on in Myanmar? Why have you had to flee?
Another man we came across spoke of violence and murder.
On the way, we saw many dead people, their heads and limbs chopped off. The slaughter took place house by house.
As we drew closer to the border, nothing had prepared us for the full extent of the day's exodus. Almost as far as the eye could see, left and right, a tide of humanity. Between 10 and 15,000 people had crossed the border in one night. Young and old, hungry, exhausted, traumatized. And for the weak, it's a painful journey into exile, with the searing heat stinging the skin infection of this child beneath an unrelenting sun. They'd been hiding out for close to a week to avoid detection along the border. This, a first meal without having to watch their backs. A man makes a call to tell relatives he's made it, while others, parched and desperate, take their chance with the filthy water all around.
Well, as you can see, they're carrying with them whatever they could salvage from their villages, their homes that they say they were burnt out of by the Myanmar military. Look at that little baby there in a basket. And there's another one here on the other side. So many young children we're seeing here today. This has to be one of the biggest single-day influxes of refugees from across the border, just over there, in the whole of this crisis.
Many just don't have the strength to walk, including Minara Begum. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy just hours before crossing into Bangladesh. Born on a riverbank, he first opened his eyes to see a cruel world in which it seems there's no place for him or the other Rohingya Muslims. I begged God to save us, her husband Mohammed tells me. We hadn't eaten for 2 days and she went into labor. I don't know what will happen to my baby now. He's so fragile. The new arrivals could end up in one of these, the giant tented camps built in a matter of days on hillsides freshly stripped of trees. The largest will soon become the biggest refugee camp on Earth.
I've seen a lot of these crises around the world, and I really wasn't quite prepared for the degree of suffering and despair. And yet these people are very resilient. They have not lost hope. They still think that they can make a life again in their home country. And it simply doubles our resolve to go back and find more resources for them until we can bring them home.
But some have died seeking sanctuary. This week, a boat carrying 60 Rohingya Muslims escaping Myanmar capsized. 14 perished, most of them children. For the Bangladeshis, the mass influx of so many refugees is difficult to control. After a delay, these Rohingya Muslims should begin moving to an established refugee camp in the coming days. The border remains open, but for those still wanting to escape Myanmar, the fear is that soon the gates could shut. Tens of thousands are already massing on the frontier, ready to make their dash for survival.